The Toronto Police Service is launching a body camera pilot project at a time when police services across the province are being asked to take on more responsibilities and aspects of the job. Joining us now with their views on what we should and shouldn't expect from the Thin Blue Line. In London, Ontario, via Skype, there's Ian Scott, former director of the province's Special Investigations Unit. And with us here in studio, Glenn DeCare. He's the chief of the Hamilton Police Service. Port Hope Mayor Linda Thompson, who's on a special committee of AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. They're looking into police affordability issues. Mike McCormick is here, president of the Toronto Police Association, and Christian Leuprecht, associate dean in the Faculty of Arts at the Royal Military College of Canada. We want to remind you that you can be part of this conversation. Our producers are hosting a Twitter chat right now, so chime in with your thoughts using the hashtag AgendaTVO. And Ian Scott, nice to have you on the line from London. Good to have the four of you around this table here in Leaside in our temporary studios. The news of the day, as we suggested, Mike, is body cameras.
Yes, sir.
What do the men and women of the force think about that?
Well, you know, the technology is changing, policing is changing. So, you know, we've seen this in the States. A lot of other services throughout Canada, Edmonton, Calgary, have already piloted them. So from our perspective, the people that I represent, our members, is we're just looking at it with the lens of a few different lenses. One of them is what is the cost, what's the cost benefit, who's going to be paying for them, what is the data storage going to look like? What are the privacy interests, not only of police officers, but of the public? And again, what is the cost-benefit analysis? So what we'd like to see is some language around that, as I said, who's going to be paying for them? And not only that, but the policies and procedures around lapel cameras. What are they going to be used for? What kind of interactions? And for us in Toronto, due to the population in large urban center in Canada, we had over 2.5 million contacts with the public last year. So out of those 2.5 million, I think 0.01%, which is less than 700, resulted in a complaint about police officers' conduct. So what are we trying to achieve with these cameras? We need a little bit more information and facts sort of to make our determination whether or not these are a good thing or a bad thing.
Chief DeCare, this is a pilot program in Toronto. 100 officers are going to start wearing them. Is this something Hamilton would consider doing?
Well, one of the things that occurred in Hamilton is stemming from a recent inquest recommendation is we've been asked to work with the Toronto Police Service in their pilot project and to review what is taking place there. Independent of that, we've established our own committee to look at the issue, and many of the issues that Mike has identified are the same issues that we will face. The return on investment, the cost, if there's money to put into policing, is this the best place to put it, and who is going to pay for those? When we have our focus on protection of victims of crime, we need to also remember that our officers are going into people's homes. There's privacy issues. We're speaking to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault. What are the rules around leaving the camera running, turning it on, turning it off? What's the justification for turning it off?
Anybody thought through these things yet? Those are some very important questions.
Well, I think the issue is we're having the dialogue, and if there's enough people around the table, smart thinking, right thinking people, that we can deal with all of these challenges. But let's be abundantly clear right from the beginning. We are oversight friendly. We look at the issues of the courts, the civil courts, the inquest courts, the SIU, all of those procedures that hold us accountable in our work. We have no problem with any of that in the work that we do.
Let me go to the gentleman out of town. You used to head up the SIU, Mr. Scott. The Chief of Police of Hamilton says most of the officers in this province are oversight friendly, and they deal with your former organization and are welcoming the potential upside of cameras. What do you say?
Well, I'm a big fan of cameras. They help absolutely with accountability, and there have been studies done already in the States where not only does it increase the accountability of the police, but it actually increases the accountability of the public in the sense that there's less complaints about police misconduct in a study that was done in Rialto, California. And the thing is, you know, the associations of the chiefs of police can debate this thing indefinitely. This issue is getting ahead of the police. We see it all the time with social media, CCTV surveillance videos, and already with video in police stations. So my view is police should embrace this. It's going to help them. It's going to help public confidence in policing. And I also think people are better behaved when they know they're being videotaped. Hopefully, like the show.
Let me follow up though with one of the issues, with one of the things that the chief did mention. Can you imagine an officer interviewing a sexual assault victim, and there's a camera on? I mean, there are some pretty ticklish issues involved with all of that, aren't there?
Yeah, there are some ticklish issues, but you have to remember that as soon as the public has contact with police, there already is a diminished sense of privacy. I mean, every time somebody phones 911, that phone call is being recorded. Every time a police officer interviews a victim of crime, if it's not being recorded, it's going to be noted in a notebook, because this is going to be part of the disclosure process if indeed it goes to trial. There are ways of working these issues out. These issues should not be impediments to the big picture here, which is that video cameras increase public confidence in policing.
All right, let's follow up with the mayor. You're not going to be the mayor for very much longer, are you? You've got about another month to go.
Yes.
You're not running again. We should just explain. My hunch is, given the work that you've done with AMO, the Municipalities Association, the first question you might have is, okay, who's going to pay for this stuff?
Absolutely, and if it was something that was mandated through legislation, we would be looking for assistance from the province. We're a very small community, and policing costs are huge for all of us, no matter what the size. It's a large part of the municipal budgets. But for a small community, we look to technology, we look to recordings, we have video surveillance, of course, in our facilities and in our interview rooms like all other forces. But looking at cameras on the lapels right now is not something we'd be looking at, but we've moved to other technology like Blackberries and things like that, probably technology larger forces have used for a long time, but we're looking and trying to make our police more effective and efficient at less cost.
Sure, let's just understand here, Toronto Force, 5,500 men and women, something like that?
We're trying to get there. It's 52 right
5,200, okay. Port Hopes?
Currently we're at 23. We've reduced our police force since 2002 from 28 members down to 23, which we're a very small police force, but that's about a 20% reduction in officers.
All right, so if the province passed a law saying we mandate that every police service in the province has to have some program dealing with lapel cameras, what would you do?
Well, we'd have to work it into our 10-year strategic plan, but we'd be looking to the province to assist with funding.
And if they said we've got a $10.5 billion deficit and we have no money for you, what would you do then?
Well, we've been very inventive with our strategic plan on how we can work with our police officers and come up with a strategic plan and do that, and it's not easy.
Okay, I've left you for the end because I wanted everybody to have their opinions out and then get the researcher to weigh in on this. Where are you on this?
Well, there's a 1984 sort of scenario where now the people with the guns, also the people with the cameras. But I think we also need to consider that civil liberties associations, by and large, tend to be for these cameras under the conditions. And I think these are the hard questions about to what extent does the uniformed member have control over when that camera runs? Is there a requirement for consent among the people who are being recorded? To what extent do the people who are being recorded have access to that data? How is that data being protected? There's broader implications here. It's not just about sort of the reduction in complaints. The pilots have consistently showed that complaints are down, but use of force is down as well. And I think this is advantageous for at least two reasons. One is that it shows that it actually improves quality of policing outcomes, because inherently every time we use force, that I think is probably the last resort we would want a uniformed member to take under circumstances. And when we have complaints and we have use of force, that inherently generates a lot of paperwork and it generates a lot of staff time by both civilians and uniformed members. That is time that can't be invested in policing. And so it means it actually frees up resources more broadly that we can now dedicate to other elements. And so in that sense, in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, my suspicion is that cameras can probably pay for themselves, while I think making perhaps everybody more happier and more effective, provided we get the framework conditions right under which this technology is used.
Mike? So everyone, Rialto, are you talking about these studies, and then that's the main one I think everybody relies on, the Rialto study, which, and again, when we talk about Rialto, we're talking about a population of 100,000, 54 frontline police officers, 89% reduction in complaints, 62% reduction in use of force. But how does that translate to a large municipal police service like Toronto, where you have 5,200? So some of the things I do agree with. that, you know, if we can, cameras are useful in certain circumstances, and that's exactly where we're coming from the association's perspective, that we need clear policy and guidelines. We're going to be being respectful of privacy interests, but again, on a cost-benefit analysis, when we're talking about millions of interactions, how is this data going to be stored? When is it going to be disclosed? Not only that, but from a cost-benefit analysis, I really suspect that there's not a huge argument for cost-benefit analysis. If the real argument is that it's going to make people sleep better when their heads hit the pillow knowing that police officers are going to have cameras, so be it. Let's call it what it is and spend the money there.
Chief?
So we looked at a period of 90 days last year within the Hamilton Police Service and our interactions with people that are suffering mental illness or emotional crisis. In that 90-day period, we responded to over 1,040 incidents involving 760 people. We apprehended 168 people, 61 went to hospital. Of those 1,040 incidents, we used force 4 times. And the 4 uses of force that we were obligated to use in those situations resulted in no injuries. So if we're going to put cameras on 800 officers and put them out there, considering the infrastructure, the privacy, all of the issues that we've talked about, the return on investment to look at those 4 incidents, we really need to take our time and make sure that we're having a strategic approach to this. We're talking about the economics of public safety and the cost of policing. Let's make sure we're investing the money where we can get the maximum value.
Christian.
And I think that's important to consider because there's sort of a security industrial complex that always comes up with new gadgets that they'd love to sell to the public first. But I think there's an ancillary benefit to cameras, which is that one of the problems about sort of the costing of police services is that it's actually really hard to gauge sort of what exactly a huge swath of officers do in their day and where there might be sort of some inefficiencies or sort of some broader efforts that we could make to improve sort of quality of outcomes. And so what cameras would allow us to do with a proper randomized study, some geek like me can actually then sit down and actually code the behavior of officers and what officers actually do. And I think what cameras will show is that a lot of the things that officers do are things that we probably don't really want to have uniformed members doing, and that by and large uniformed members themselves aren't keen on doing.
Hold off on that, because that discussion is to come. Hang in there, Mike. That discussion is to come. I do want to play some tape at this point because your service, less than a year ago, officers widely praised for their handling of a situation, and we have some video of that. So let's roll that tape, and then we'll come back and chat. Roll tape, please, Sheldon.
She's resisting. No, I'm not! What are you doing? Make sure to hold on to that video. I cannot go into great detail about why, but our domestic policy is very specific, sir. It does not make allowances to just let people go when they've broken the law. Unfortunately, right, she decided to try and resist while I was placing her under arrest. And well, ma'am, I know it may look and appear to be something much more, hold on, let me speak, please. It may look to be much worse than it is, but I can tell you that it is only because she is resisting so violently and flailing around on the ground. I'm doing my best, ma'am, not to hurt that girl. I'm not going to get into a wrestling match, right? A prolonged wrestling match with a young girl, because the longer she fights, the more likely one of the 2 of us is to get hurt. And while it may appear to be very rough to you, I apologize for you having to see that. But unfortunately, I have the lawful authority to arrest her. I am obligated to arrest her, and I can't tell you why. And I'm really sorry about that, but she deserves some privacy too, as do the victims of her crimes.
Ian Scott, what's your view of what we just saw?
Well, assuming the officer had reasonable grounds to arrest, I think he handled himself in an exemplary way. But I mean, I think it raises some very interesting issues about police wearable cameras. This was a social media tape, and I saw this at the SIU over and over again, where social media only started filming when an incident was in progress. And often what you got was a clip in the middle of the proceedings, the encounter, which looked, pretty bad. Whereas if you had wearable cameras, you could roll it back, say a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, to the situation where you have a much greater understanding of why the encounter happened. And you also had very much the perspective of the officer as opposed to a member of the public. So I think, if anything, this helps with respect to the argument that there should be wearable cameras on the police.
Chief, do you agree that that your officer actually seemed, to put Ian Scott's word on the table there, exemplary in the way he handled the situation? Would it be better if he were wearing a camera at the time so you could see what preceded what was captured on film?
Well,
Or
first,
video,
to
rather?
keep that in perspective, I had the opportunity to speak to both of the officers that are involved in that exemplary performance of professional duties. And again, there's an example of a citizen, as Ian has properly pointed out, essentially trying to play gotcha with the officers. And yes, he got us. He got us doing our job the way that we're supposed to do our job. Now, would that be enhanced in any way by a lapel camera? Again, we run into many issues in how you wear the camera, what it sees, the direction that it faces. In a struggle like that, what is it going to catch? We don't know. So there's all those dynamics to put into the mix to figure this out. But I have to tell you, that behavior that we saw there is nothing that we don't see in Canadian police services across this nation every single day by the professional men and women that do this job.
The behavior of the
officers
doing
that work.
And the arrestee, I presume, as well. You see a lot of that.
We face that all the time, but there's an example, and we've reviewed every component of that. There's an example of officers doing a great job.
Christian, one of the things that I've read about this in the States, the pilot projects they have in the United States, and one of the things that constantly comes up is the notion of human error. The officer forgets to turn the camera on, right? I mean, these things don't run 24/7. You actually have to flip a switch, I guess, and turn it on. So can they really be all that helpful if, in some circumstances, the officer simply forgets to turn the camera on?
I mean, so these are sort of the parameters. Under what conditions does the camera just only turn on when the officer gets out of the car automatically? Does the officer actually turn the camera on, whatnot? But sort of by and large, I think this is a way of kind of for us to think about how can technology sort of enhance the overall effectiveness of the service that police deliver, and to what extent do individuals have control over that particular technology, both the members and the citizens that have to interact with the technology, because we know that one of the challenges with data is once the data is out there, there's always this risk of data that were not intended to fall into particular hands. And I think one of the challenges that we face, and where cameras can be advantageous in the Canadian context, is a lot of Canadians watch American police shows, and even if you watch an American police show, if you watch about 5 minutes, you can probably count about 10 constitutional legal violations that happen in those shows. So it is a completely unrealistic portrayal of the police service. And the video that we just saw, I think, represents, by and large, how Canadian police officers conduct themselves. And it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate this is not an American TV show, and that also Canadian policing culture is somewhat different than policing culture in at least some American municipalities. And so to that extent, this can certainly, I think, document, I think, the probity with which members in uniform conduct themselves.
Stand by. I see Mike is champing at the bit, David. Let me go to Mayor Thompson for one follow-up. If this thing were to happen in a much more widespread way in the province of Ontario, would you want to make sure that you had access to that video, you as the employer of the officers?
The Police Services Board being the employer, really it should not have access to that. It's an operational issue. The Chief of Police has access to that, the SIU, if they're working on that. The board's role is governance, and all of the items that the chief identified, we need to make sure we have good policies in place for our officers, for the chief to implement and write orders against. We need to make sure we're working with our associations to make sure that we're looking out for the best interest of the members of our community and our employees,
but
the
you're
officers.
The funder. You're the funder.
We are, and
so you don't want access to that video?
No, that's an operational issue. Really, it is an operational, and police service boards really need to identify. They need to look above the operational issues. That the Police Services Act is very clear. They are operational issues, and we need to make sure we're providing policies for the police to work in that are protect our communities. And we also hold the budget strings and make sure that we're working in a budget and giving direction that will work.
Okay, Mike, go ahead.
All right. So first of all, Linda, whether you want cameras or not, or whether they're a good idea or not, they're coming. Like it or not, they're coming. Cost-benefit analysis. Who cares? You see what's happening in the States, in New Jersey, and like everyone keeps, all we have is Rialto before us. Okay, but what are our cameras about? Are they about accountability and transparency? And in this video where police officers are performing an arrest, public policing in a public space, you tape it, you videotape it, it becomes evidence, it's disclosed, and it shows that we're doing things. And like I say, people can go to bed and say, okay, the cops have a camera on, great. But when Christian's talking exactly what the concerns we have from an organizational perspective is that Now, no, we're not using cameras for accountability and transparency. We're going to have them on the police officers and monitor their day-to-day, everything they do to make sure that they're being efficient with their time and
What's
their
your thought
police
on
costs.
that?
It's completely contrary to what these things are being sold as, what they're being, if it's an accountability piece. Are we going to put cameras on police officers so we can just monitor their time and ensure that they're working to the highest efficiencies? Is that what we're going to do with everybody? And I think that is a non-starter for us as an association.
So you are open to a discussion about cameras when there's an interaction with a potential arrestee?
Potential arrestee, public policing. We already know.
But not the rest of the day.
Not the rest of the day. Do I need to have police officers film while they're going to the bathroom, while they're eating a sandwich, or talking bad about their supervisors? Not that we do, but do we need that type of stuff? Is that helping? Is that what this is about? No. And I think that totally dilutes what the cameras and lapel cameras are going to be used for, and the accountability and transparency issue.
Let me get Ian Scott on that. Do you agree with Mike McCormick that there is a line that ought, maybe not a thin blue line, but a line that ought not to be crossed here in terms of the officer's own privacy during the course of their daily duties?
Well, clearly there's going to be some privacy issues involved in this, but the police are not the only people that are monitored by employers through video cameras. I mean, every time you go into Loblaws or a supermarket, everybody's being filmed in those places, including the employees, to deal with issues of whether there's going to be theft. I mean, I'm just not troubled by the overall concept of accountability. And because it might not be used for one reason, that's some issue that the association can work out with management. But let's deal with the overall issue of public confidence in policing and oversight agencies. Over and over again when I was at the SIU, I would have benefited from having video footage of incidents like we just saw a few minutes ago. I mean, we had a number of cases at the SIU where wrists and bones were broken in precisely those situations. And trying to figure out what was going on without videotape is very, very difficult.
Let me just clarify here, Mr. Scott, which is nobody's arguing about the interaction between officer and potential arrestee. The question is the rest of the day. Do we want officers to be on camera when they're doing paperwork? Do we want them to be on camera when they're on a stakeout sitting in their squad car for 2 or 3 hours at a time? Do we want that?
Let's go to the stakeout issue. In fact, the front page of the Toronto Star today indicated that a police officer was caught lying because he was on a stakeout and he said things under oath that never happened. And yeah, there are other incidents where the police should have the video camera on. I mean, clearly there are privacy issues involving the video. When they're eating their lunch or going to the washroom, these kind of things. Dealing with confidential informers can be a very problematic area. But overall, I'm not troubled by the fact that we should have the video cameras, in general, presumptively operating.
I know, Christian, we are in a brave new world here where everybody's on camera all the time. But do you want cameras in your classroom at RMC filming you 24/7, whether you are giving a lecture or in your office meeting with students or writing a book or whatever? You want that kind of a world? In
fact, the premise of the inverted classroom is that we put a lot of our lecture material online for students so that we can actually use the classroom to have discussions and develop the sort of critical thinking skills and whatnot that we might want. So I think, in that sense, it is part of the new reality. The question is, how do we use it to optimize overall outcomes? And then we need to define what those outcomes are.
That's different. You've got those. What you just described is so people can have access to your content. That's not an attempt to see how efficiently you are using your hours of the day, which is, I think, what Mr. McCormick's concern is.
Exactly.
So are you open to that kind of scrutiny?
I think we would find that most public servants, by virtue of the fact that they get paid, compensated quite fairly, benefit from something called hijack capital. And this sort of hijack hostage capital means that because people get paid well and have good benefits and they will conduct themselves in a very proper manner, precisely because they value the overall organization they work for, the way they're compensated, their benefits and whatnot. And so in that sense, I think, especially in this country, the cases of people misconducting themselves are relatively isolated. At the same time, we need to remember that the police service is probably the organization that has the greatest direct control over people's lives. They are authorized with a sidearm. They have authority of arrest that no other organization has in that sort of breadth that we give to police services.
Quick follow-up from Mike.
We're not disputing that. And exactly, you're right in that context. When we're making decisions, we're arresting people, we're taking away people's liberties and stuff, and nobody's going to debate the context of that. Also, I agree that, yeah, we have, as I said, 2.5 million, 0.01%, 700 complaints. I need 30,000 additional complaints just to get to that 1 percentile. So, yeah, we can wrap our heads around that. But this whole Big Brother, and when you're talking about, so is every public employee, everybody, are you going to wear cameras? To all our politicians should be wearing cameras so that we can make sure that we're getting efficient time from our politicians, our professors, everybody. It's ridiculous.
Chief, I'm going to get you back in here, and in doing so, I'm going to quote here the former Supreme Court Justice Frank Iacobucci, who did a report on this, examining interactions between the police and people experiencing mental health problems, and then I want to get your response to something he wrote. Here's one of his conclusions. A universal theme frequently conveyed to this review by police, mental health workers, and the community of people who have experienced mental illness is that Ontario does not have a mental health system. At the same time as the system is weak, the modern trend towards the deinstitutionalization of people with mental illness and the modern principle that patients should have the freedom to decline mental health care except in extreme cases mean that a substantial number of people in crisis find themselves in encounters with the police. This, of course, emerging from the whole Sammy Ateem case, a man who was shot and killed on a streetcar in Toronto. How does this situation, so described by the former Supreme Court judge, play out for your officers on a daily basis?
So let me be first very clear that I'm not going to address the Ateem matter in any way, shape, or form as it's currently before the courts. But in general, the justice's remarks there and the section that he has written that about the deinstitutionalization, something that has been going on in the province of Ontario for many decades. It is about a different way of providing care to those individuals that require it. Some of the concepts behind that is that people will participate more in their actual care and will stick to the treatment regime if it's more of a voluntary process. That takes them out of the institutionalized setting, puts them into the community. But then there's a number of issues that flow from that. And while on a healthcare perspective, it may look and sound very good around a discussion table. What actually takes place on the street is that then becomes our issue. Because when people are deinstitutionalized and put into the community, then there are parameters, there are regulations with respect to compliance, there are community treatment orders, and that's where the police get involved. And let's boil this right down to the basics. People don't phone the police and say, at this location there is a person here who suffers from schizophrenia, who suffers from. They say there is a person here who is stealing, assaulting, threatening, harming, and we get involved in relation to the behavior, not necessarily the mental illness. I'd love to have all the information about the mental illness and we'll deal with that in time. But when people call the police, it's about behavior that is taking place, and they call us to tell us they want this behavior or what's taking place on the streets to stop.
But presumably your officers today and going forward will need much more training in how to deal with people suffering from mental health issues. Is that fair to say?
There is no doubt that we can always enhance the delivery of service by providing additional training. And in the Hamilton Police Service, we've just instituted into the block training a 3.5-hour session on Safe Talk, suicide intervention, assist training, applied strategies for suicide intervention. We've had our crisis intervention training in place for many, many years. Our model has been adapted to include the Social Navigator program, a much more proactive approach to dealing with mental health issues on our streets, and trying to keep people out of the policing system and out of the court system. We're putting more money up front in the preventative, proactive piece. Social Navigator, our action strategy, and now we've even morphed into the rapid response team, where we have a mental health professional and a police officer responding as a first response.
Is that new?
That's new. We only started that in November. We've had COAST in place in Hamilton for 17 years, dealing with about 5,000 people every year. The Hamilton Police apprehending just under 2,000 people per year. But now, recognizing a gap between the COAST services and 911 emergency services, we now have put in place a rapid response team. Okay. And it is reducing our apprehension rate by about 60%. So we are actually avoiding the costs of the mental health system by using this process.
Let me get Mike McCormick on this as well. The Iacobucci report also recommends that when hiring police officers, applicants have to have just a lot more knowledge about mental health issues. For example, have a mental health first aid certificate, preference to applicants who've got volunteer experience with the mentally ill, preference to candidates given to those with degrees in nursing or social work, psychologists looking for positive personality traits rather than just negative ones. How do you and your members feel about this new accent on mental health that candidates going forward apparently are going to have? Well,
you know, first of all, when we're talking about this this issue, people have to understand this is not a bulk of what we do in policing. This is a small percentage of what we do in policing. But anything that gives us a better candidate or improved candidate skill set, you're marked on a sliding scale anyhow. So if it makes a better candidate, we think that's good. We think that could be helpful. But again, you know, Toronto being such a diverse city, in certain areas you have larger pockets of people who are institutionalized or out on the street, or people at risk. So are you only going to have a certain amount of people for that area or whatever? What we think is more important is that the service provide training and that we get better, well-rounded police officers. So training for everybody and in this type of issue. And what we've done in Toronto, as Glenn was saying, we've added a full extra day to our training, our in-service training module to deal with these issues. But I think it's incumbent upon the service to train our people and improve our training for sure.
Ian Scott, it sounds as if Justice Iacobucci is looking for a different kind of police officer going forward. Maybe not somebody with what we traditionally think of as the brawn to do the job, but maybe the brains and the training to deal with a lot of the mental health issues we've been discussing. Is that a good thing in your view?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we always want de-escalation to be the result in one of these high intensity encounters. However, you know, the reality is, and I saw this at the SIU over and over again, is that at the end of, you know, we do expect police officers to be able to deal with situations where there's somebody who's armed and dangerous, and it's deeply regrettable, but these incidences are not going to go away completely. We've kind of been around the block on this over and over again. I mean, you go back to the Donaldson inquiry that happened in the early 90s, there were recommendations out of that, which led to the crisis resolution course at Toronto. They've been tinkering with it ever since. It kind of comes and goes. As far as I can see, the real issue is that we are going to continue to see these scenarios arise where, unfortunately, police are going to have to use either lethal or force that leads to serious injury. And they're very, very tragic, and the public has a hard time with them, and obviously they have a hard time with them. But from my view, the way to deal with this issue, because I hate to say it, but it's not going away. I mean, it would be nice to have the goal of 0 deaths, and I agree with that goal, but, I mean, everyone agrees with that goal. But the reality is that there will be subsequent interactions leading to the lethal use of force, and some of those are going to involve people in crisis. In fact, a lot of them are. So the big question here is, how do we sustain or build up public confidence in policing when members of the public are going to see these issues arise even more through videotape? And my view is that the way to deal with that is to guarantee that we do have the cameras on. There is a very effective accountability system which has to be explained by some independent agency so the public can at least understand where there's an investigation and that somebody independent of the police has done the investigation on a very good evidentiary basis. So I go back to, you know, underscoring the need for these cameras.
Last word on this, please, to Christian, then we're going to talk about something else.
One of the challenges is that I think a lot of security policy is a little bit like theology, lots of propositions and very little evidence for any of them. And what this particular issue shows, this is an issue I think where we need a lot more data, and where ostensibly perhaps randomized studies with cameras and whatnot can allow us to get a sense of why is it that people make the mistakes that they make, is there sort of and how might we improve that through training. But the other side of that coin is the professionalization, and that inherently we pick people in the front end and then we hope we can kind of train them to be who we want them to be. And we do this throughout professions in Canada. We don't have effective studies that actually follow people over 10, 20, 30 years and try to understand who are the police officers, who are the military officers, who are the physicians, who are the business leaders that really embody what we think, for instance, are the people that we would like to generate at our police college, in our police force, at our business school, at our medical school. And to actually understand what characteristics did they bring into the organization at the outset. And I think if we had a much better sense of those characteristics, then we wouldn't perhaps need to worry quite as much about sort of after the fact training and trying to sort of tinker around the edge.
Brief response,
real
please.
Quick. Mr. Scott well knows we just went through an inquest. 3 people who were shot or fatally by the police. All 3 of those were videotaped by in-car cameras. And for you to suggest that it's a mistake or whatever, all our officers were investigated by the SIU, cleared, inquest into the officer's behavior, and although the outcome was unfortunate, the officers behaved appropriately. So to say that these officers made mistakes, and I agree with Mr. Scott that there will be zero is the there will be the zero goal is the goal we should all strive for. However, this is the reality, and we have finally trained police officers, tons of oversight, cleared by SAU, cleared by an inquest on their behavior. So to say that they made a mistake or whatever, make these suggestions or that camera's going to change it, these three were caught on video.
Okay, 15 minutes and change to go here, and I want to raise one more issue to put on the table. We've been talking cameras, we've been talking accountability, mental health issues. Let's start with finding the right number. This is something that you folks had a discussion about at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference not too long ago in London, Ontario, where Ian Scott finds himself right now. And to that end, I want to read something here done by Livio Di Matteo for the Fraser Institute. This is he's a university professor from Sudbury, I think.
Lakehead University.
Lakehead, sorry. Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay. My bad. Sheldon, if you would, put this up. Staffing levels and public expenditures for police forces across the country grew substantially over the last decade, even while crime rates dropped dramatically. Between 2001 and 2012, police officers per 100,000 of population in Canada rose 8.7%, while the crime rate declined by 26.3%. This was accompanied by an increase in expenditures and a decline in workload as measured by criminal code incidents per officer. Growing numbers of police officers and declining crime rates raise the question of whether the most efficient use is being made of policing resources across the country. Okay, this is wonderfully controversial, so we're going to get into it here. Okay, Mayor Thompson, weigh in. Where are you on this?
Well, more and more calls today are generated by the police themselves, investigations generated by the police. So they are out, they're being proactive in their policing. They're out there doing their jobs, they're being proactive. So the crime rate is continuing to go down because of this. We have a very small community. They work very hard, our investigation branch, in looking at those types of crimes. And crimes themselves, while I'm not the expert, are taking longer and longer to investigate. The requirements that are needed today are so much different than they were 10, 20 years ago. So we're seeing those rates decline, and it's often hard for police services boards to measure success, because we want to see those rates go down, but we know that it comes at a cost.
Okay, Chief DeCare, here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing declining crime rates, partially because police are doing a better job, partially, as demographer David Foote would tell us, because there are fewer mischievous young men out there to get in trouble, and therefore the taxpayer, if I can put it that way, might want to spend less on policing going forward. Is that a good idea?
Well, I think first of all, we need to congratulate ourselves as a system in criminal justice and in public safety. If you said, the data there goes back about 12, 13 years, if you said we're going to set a goal to achieve a 26% reduction in crime, and we achieved it, we should all be celebrating and saying yes. And that's what our communities want. They want public safety.
But the next question
how is it produced?
Can we therefore spend less?
And the issue then becomes, well, the assumption is as simplistic as the crime rate is falling, so let's reduce our police officers. Let's remember that in this data, we're dealing with the crime rate. The crime rate says that a homicide, a sexual assault, an assault and the theft of a bicycle are all just one. Well, we know that's not true, because a homicide can cost a police service up to $1 million in preparation and presentation to the court. We know that the Supreme Court, as we've heard from Justice Iacobucci, they can make rulings that cost police services millions of dollars, one being the Feeney decision. The Feeney decision, we want to go in to arrest somebody, we now need a warrant to get into the house. That means we have to secure the house, leave our officers there, go get the warrant, apply for the warrant, receive the warrant, take the warrant, execute the warrant. It's a Supreme Court decision that we're obliged to follow. So we do. And that costs us millions of dollars in Canadian policing. So what we're producing in terms of public safety, we have to congratulate the men and women on the front line of our services and our community partners, because we don't do this all by ourselves. So our whole community is coming together. There's a lot of complex issues that are in that need to be addressed. Housing, education, employment, they're not in this report. So it is a complex issue that requires a complex response, but our part, which is public safety, Our officers are producing that public safety through their community-based policing initiatives, through their partnerships, and this is exactly what we want in all of our communities.
Mike McCormick, for those who say crime is down, therefore we need fewer cops on the beat, you say what?
Well, first of all, I agree with Chief Zakir that, you know, properly deployed police officers, and we've seen studies out of the States, if they're properly deployed at the right times, it does have an impact on crime. So I think it is kudos to what we do in the policing profession. The next thing is that's only one benchmark as we're discussing as far as what we do in policing. And Linda brought up a really significant point. The time on call, not the time or the amount of calls, but for instance, a domestic assault 10 years ago took 163 minutes to do. Today it takes 455 minutes to do. And it's all because of these legislative requirements and other requirements that people expect from a professional police officer. So there's actually less police officer time being spent in proactive policing out on the streets. And not only that, but for Toronto, we're a very unique city. We are a destination city. We've got the Taste of the Danforth, we have Gay Pride, we have all these major events coming into the city. So we got to look at it. Police officers' time, again, is not just spent with specific crime stats or reported crime. The other question that we have from an association perspective is I think it's up to 66% of all crime is now unreported. What are the factors that are driving that? Where are we getting to? What is the public?
If it's unreported, how do we know that?
Well, again, it's put out every 4 years, and the next one comes out this year. It's put out by the government, and it goes to polling the public and seeing, you know, as far as unreported crime and what the reasons around that. So that study's coming out again, I think, at the end of this year. But again, you know, why is that happening? And there's a lot of other issues going around what we provide in a police, as I said, in the police service, especially in Toronto, as far as a destination city. So this is a good benchmark to start discussions, but it's not the only thing we do in policing. And we really got to look at overall what we're doing in policing and the cost of policing. And even in Toronto, when we look at that, you know, and what we've done, we're at the table with the Future Policing Advisory Committee with the province. We've civilianized 110 uniformed police positions last year, which we called the Booker positions. We're civilianizing our IDENT, our CSI.
Just tell me what that means. Civilianizing meaning an officer doesn't have to do it, somebody else can do it. We still see paid duty officers out there directing traffic all the time, man.
Okay, pay duties, you know, pay duties are a different discussion because they are hired by private companies. It is a private contract between the officer and that. It doesn't have an impact on the public purse and what the taxpayers are paying for. So, you know, that's a separate discussion. And in fact, that pay duties generate money to offset the administrative costs of policing.
Sorry, Ian Scott, hang in there. I'm going to get you in a second. I mean, the point of paid duty is that if you're making all of this extra money on the side, courtesy of a developer who wants you to, you know, direct traffic around his new condo that's going up, does that therefore allow the taxpayer to spend less out of his or her pocket on you guys?
That's a voluntary thing. If you wanted to babysit the grandkids and you got $3 an hour or whatever, you know, what are we waiting on that? Come on.
Ian Scott, are we paying too much for our police services?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's look at Toronto. The same article indicated that in the last 11 years, the crime rate has dropped 41% in Toronto. From my perspective, this is really not an issue that should be answered by the association or even by management. This is an issue for police services boards and municipal councils to look at the big issue here. This is all taxpayers' money. 25% of the realty taxes in Toronto, where I pay taxes, goes to the policing services. If there's a 41% drop in the crime rate, which is really what the focus of what policing should do, I mean, our municipal councillors and the police services board should be saying, look, maybe there's other ways of allocating this money. Maybe if we allocate this money so there's more support for those who suffer from major mental disorders, there's more daycare, there would be even more of a drop in the crime rate. So, you know, this is a social issue that should be resolved through the budgetary process through the municipal councillors. And we right now are on the precipice of a major change. We're coming up to municipal elections in the next month. There'll be new municipal councillors. In Toronto, the new police services board is going to have to pick the new chief. And my view, what they should be doing is this. They should be saying to the new chief, look, this is going to be part of a performance contract, that we're going to look at the budget and figure out ways to reduce expenditure. Right now, there's $1 billion a year is being spent in the police budget, and I think there are better ways of dealing with it when you've got a crime rate dropping by 41% over 11 years.
Chief Dicaire.
We've just, to tie a couple of these issues we've talked about together right now, the assumption that the crime rate is falling so we can reduce our police officers. In that study, that does not include the components of the lengthy discussion that we just had around mental health. So I agree in part with Ian that it is the board's responsibility to really give the direction and say, what is it that we want our police service to do? But more importantly, what is it that we do not want them to do? Because if we accept the Fraser report and say that you can reduce because of the reduction in the crime rate, then clearly, if that doesn't include mental health, do you not want us to respond in mental health crisis? And if so, fine, just say so. But don't hold us then accountable for something that happens on the streets. But our issue is public safety, and we will respond. And really, right now, there's nobody else out there to do it. So who's going to do it?
Mayor Thompson?
And that's the exact point. The Police Services Board really have to play the governance role, and they have to remember to do that, and working with their senior management to determine how can we better use our resources. We know taxpayers in Port Hope, policing is 33% of our budget. So how can we look at that and be sustainable? The community has said we want to maintain municipal policing, but it's at almost $300 per 100,000 of assessment. That's
what if you just got rid of it and made a contract with the Ontario Provincial Police to do the work instead?
We've done 6 studies in 13 years to do that, and I know more about policing than I ever really wanted to know, and costing. We do have OPP in our rural area. They pay about $150 per 100,000.
So it's half as much.
The rural community says they want the OPP, and they're very satisfied with the service. The urban area they've had a police force for many years. They're very proud of their police force, and they have a great amount of confidence in their police officers. So they want to keep it, and they're prepared to pay more for them. And they're prepared to pay more for it until comes to taxation season. So our board had to work with our senior manager and our officers. We sat down with our officers, our association, and said, how can we do this differently? How can we augment our skills, work with those other people in our community, and look at how we could save costs? Because we had to build a new building too. So, not only are we're keeping our force, so what services are mandatory? And that was a key discussion. What services do we, under the Police Services Act, are we required to do? What's a nice to do for the community, and what's a must do? And if there's other areas or other bodies that can provide that service, we need to let them do that.
Let me go to Christian on that. Should we, as Chief Dicaire says, should we have a new rule in place that says if there's somebody experiencing a mental health issue and is clearly in crisis, it's a safety issue from a policing point of view, but it's a mental health issue from a healthcare point of view, maybe we don't dispatch the police to those anymore? Maybe we dispatch a mental health expert who can deal with people in crisis?
Well, let me rule that into sort of, it harkens to the same problem that the report lays open. That kind of the report makes a valiant effort at getting sort of some of the data out there, but that ultimately the report takes what's measurable and makes it matter, as opposed to figuring out what matters and making it measurable. And these discussions about what sort of, for instance, should the call protocols be are ultimately about qualitative data points. And that's where I think that perhaps cameras in a properly randomized, properly anonymized study, where it doesn't become surveillance of officers, but gives us access to some qualitative data points that we can then code, can help us produce sort of better sort of call protocols, for instance, and how we deal with these issues. And when it comes to discussion about salaries and budgets and whatnot, the problem with the report is that it doesn't give us any data points as to what should the optimized sort of compensation for an officer be somewhere in the country. And it continues to use sort of these arbitrary data points of, okay, we have 195 police officers, I think, per 100,000 on average in Canada, but we don't know whether that's the right level. We don't know whether half as many officers would produce the same community outcomes, whether twice as many officers would produce twice as safe communities. And so I think we need a different funding model that provides much greater incentives for all the people who work in the service delivery area to work together. And I think the police have shown real leadership on this, because they know they can't arrest themselves out of these types of problems. But we need much greater incentives also from the province to provide funding models, as we have tried in healthcare. Some of these work better than others, but to try to provide incentives for people to come together and find different ways of doing business that are more cost effective and produce produce better outcomes.
A follow-up, Mayor Thompson?
And it really is about working with those partnerships and other organizations, as the chief mentioned, because those mental health issues, we have them in our community, and it takes away half of my police force to deal with an issue, to take someone for care. And we're leaving our community open because we don't have those resources, and it happens more and more often. And so it's working with those partnerships, but how do we work with those and get that model working better? There's a lot of communities and police organizations that are trying to develop models and have developed models that worked, but we need something throughout that will assist all forces.
Well, when we try to consider what the police ought to do and what ought not to do, it can get problematic. And I remember a conversation held on this program with the mayor of Cochrane, Ontario, who said, a lot of what my guys do up there is chase wild bears. Now, this is something I don't think your guys in Hamilton do too much.
I haven't seen that one.
You haven't seen that one? I don't think the Toronto Police Service does much of that.
The odd coyote, and we cut it off there. We cut it off
some
there.
raccoons or coyotes. Raccoons. But they're chasing bears in Northern Ontario, you know, and I mean, Ian Scott, is this what we want police to be doing?
Well, I mean, maybe that's why in Ontario we basically have a municipally driven police service. It's got to respond to community concerns, but you got to remember the funding's municipal as well. That's the reason why, whether we like it or not, policing has got to come to grips with its costs. It's just too high. There's too much taxpayers' money going into it when there's too many other competing interests. I mean, look at Toronto with the issues of transit and a plethora of other issues. This is the reason why, in my view, this really rests at the municipal level and the Police Services Board level to decide what we want in these circumstances and to prioritize it with all the other stresses that go on the taxpayer's budget. I mean, if I lived in Cochrane, I probably would be very concerned about the bears coming out.
But you might think that a Ministry of Natural Resources official ought to be in charge of doing that, not some police officer trained to arrest people. I don't think he's going to arrest a bear, or she's going to arrest a bear. Anyway, go ahead.
Municipal policing in Hamilton has been 20% of the city's budget. It's been that way, I believe. I looked at probably 12, 15 years of data. The cost on the overall budget has not changed. It's been 20%. But let's get right down. We can get wrapped up in the Fraser report and the statistics and the intent and the measurables. Steve, the issue is our people are at the pointy end of the stick. They're delivering the service. When people call 911, they want a response, and they get a response, and they get a professional response by the men and women of all police agencies that provide the service. They want to go and do the right thing at the right time and provide that support. Nobody wants to go out there and use force. Nobody comes to work any day and says, today's the day I'm going to use force. That just doesn't happen. I've never seen it in almost 35 years of policing. So the grassroots issues are, we need to make sure that we're working with our hospitals. We have a wonderful relationship with St. Joe's and a new protocol for the transference of patients to reduce stigma and get them into care. It's reduced our average wait time from 3.5 hours to we're now at 50 minutes. So we've recovered a whole bunch of administrative time sitting in waiting rooms. Those are the partnerships that we need to build on, and those are the partnerships that will save or at least cost avoid the money that's going.
A couple of minutes to go, Mike.
Okay, and same thing in Toronto. Since 1997, roughly, we've taken up 10.4% of the budget when you look at that pipe, and police resources have not crept up. All of a sudden it's uncontrollable. There's a recent report, a RAND report on the fiscal health of Toronto, and they even spoke about this in Toronto, saying that police and fire were not the driving factors in the budget, and in fact police and fire have remained constant for almost the last 20 years. Not only that, they talked about in Toronto, for instance, you know, and I live in Toronto as Mr. Scott does, but since 2001, when you factor in inflation and population growth, actually it's been a 15% reduction in the taxes that we pay in Toronto. So policing, we provide, and it'll be ultimately not up to the police service boards or the police chiefs or the associations. It's up to the people who live in the city. What kind of policing do they want? Police do provide safe communities which attract businesses, which attract residents, but we also provide a multifaceted. It's no longer a one-dimensional service where we just go out and lock up the bad guy. That's not what we do. And a lot of these things that we're responding to, whether they're mental health, people who are intoxicated, when we're responding to calls or we're going out there proactive policing, there is often a huge potential for either crime or disorder associated to that behavior. So when we're going out to deal with somebody who's in a mental health crisis and there's a potential criminal element to that, you're sending a police officer because we can deal with all types of aspects around that one event. Instead of saying, oh, we'll send out a mental health practitioner. Well, that's not going to work. Let's send out a social worker. And that's not going to work. And let's send out a police officer. So we are efficient. we can be more efficient, and we're looking at ways to do that through scheduling, civilianization, and other things. But the partnerships are the key to police sustainability.
Linda Thompson.
When we talk about the large organizations and 10 and 20% of budgets, when you're looking at smaller communities, it's usually 30, 35, in some areas much larger. So what I found in talking with a lot of groups, the Police Services Board really are the governance, and they really need to take control, be involved, and understand what their responsibility is and what their authority is, and really manage it, because they are the group that really needs to work with the chiefs, with the associations, to really move forward. I mean, we have excellent police officers in our municipal force and with the OPP, and it's working with our senior management and with our inspectors that we've been able to control costs and come up with a 10-year plan to control those costs.
Let's give the soon-to-be former mayor of Port Hope, Ontario, the last word on this program. Good of all of you to join us here in our studio in Leaside. Ian Scott, thanks for being there via Skype in London, Ontario. Appreciate having you all on the broadcast tonight.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.